A lot of times we think in order to set boundaries and how to handle conflict, we have to just get really aggressive and just be really just in that person's face in order to kind of get our point across. But if you are operating in feminine energy, a lot of times that just does not come natural to you. A lot of times when I was struggling to set boundaries, or whenever I would end up in a situation where I would have to defend myself, oftentimes people would be like, Devin, you need to get a backbone. You need to tell that person what's up, let them know that you are not to be played with, and start getting really angry and upset with the other person. But if you are operating in your feminine energy, doing that could be really draining. I'm gonna teach you how to set boundaries with feminine energy without becoming aggressive or passive. So number one, understand what your boundaries are. In order to stick to our boundaries, we have to know, okay, what are these boundaries that I'm going to start making with myself? And once you tell yourself, okay, this is a boundary that I have, then stick to it. So that could be like if you're communicating with someone or having a disagreement, your boundary could be, you are not going to disrespect me right now. We are going to be communicating in a mature way without us raising our voice or yelling or cursing. Because it is almost impossible to start setting boundaries with people if you don't even know yourself what your boundaries are. So you really have to think to yourself, okay, what is it in situations that make me uncomfortable? What is something that I am making exceptions for that I really don't want to make exceptions for? And there are just so many different types of boundaries. You could have work boundaries, you can have friendship boundaries, you can have boundaries with your family, you can have boundaries with your children, you can have sexual boundaries, you can have boundaries with your partners, you can have boundaries with your finances, social media, food, dating, privacy, time, the list goes on. There's so many different types of boundaries. So figure out what your boundaries are, and then once you figure out what the boundaries that you have set in place for yourself, then stick to it. So number two, do not get out of character. Setting boundaries and handling situations where there might be conflict does not mean you need to become aggressive in order to get your point across. If you start to become aggressive and start raising your voice and yelling and cursing, number one, that's not how ladies typically behave, and that's not operating in your feminine energy. So in order to set boundaries, you do not need to get out of character in order to do it. Because the moment you get out of character and that other person sees you getting out of character and you getting really upset and angry, they basically win at that point. Because they see, okay, if I keep doing this, I'm gonna keep getting her out of character, therefore I win, and they get like a kick out of that. They are not worth your energy anyways. You do not wanna be around that person who causes you to exert unnecessary energy in order to get your point across, in order to get your feelings across. Nobody in this world is worth putting all of that energy out into the world, all of that negative energy, and causing you to become extremely upset and aggressive. There are ways to get your point across in uncomfortable situations without becoming aggressive and agitated. So in order to get your point across a lot better, you really need to understand what the difference between being passive, being aggressive, and being assertive. So I'm gonna give y'all a scenario. Let's say, for example, you're going out with a friend, and this particular friend always wants to borrow your outfit. Well, when you let her borrow your outfits, she either never gives your outfits back, or they come back dirty or damaged. So I'm gonna give you three scenarios. One's gonna be passive, one's gonna be assertive, and one's gonna be aggressive. Hey, is it okay if I borrow this outfit for tonight? Oh, yeah, I mean, I guess it's okay. Do you mind if you dry clean it first before giving it back to me? It's okay if you don't have time. Okay, cool, thanks. So a passive person is a person who is just afraid to speak up. They kind of go into a shell when they're in certain uncomfortable situations, and they speak really softly. You know, they might avoid looking at you. They kind of like withdraw from you or kind of like slouch away because they're a little bit nervous about setting boundaries, and they tend to agree with others despite how they're personally feeling, and they kind of just like value themselves less than others. Whereas an aggressive person is someone who interrupts, they talk over the other person, they get really loud, and basically like only consider their feelings. Hey, is it okay if I borrow this outfit for tonight? What? No, take it off. You never give me my stuff back, and you didn't even ask for permission first. Anytime I let you borrow my stuff, you never give it back to me, or it comes back filthy. Oh my God, why are you being so rude right now? Whereas an assertive person, you are talking more in like a conversational tone. You speak very openly. You're just talking, just like regular talking. You're not getting loud. You're not getting quiet. You know, you're continuing to make eye contact with the person that you're speaking to. And your goal is basically not to win the argument, but to get to a common point with the other person. Hey, is it okay if I borrow this outfit for tonight? Actually, I do mind. If I let you wear it, can you give it back to me by next week? Just because a couple of times I let you borrow my stuff and I never got it back, or it came back dirty. I would really appreciate it. oh yeah, girl, I'm so sorry about that. I'll make sure to get it back to you as soon as possible and clean. Number 3, no is an answer. A lot of times people think in order to set boundaries, we have to sit here and explain ourselves and say, this is why I have set boundary. Like if a friend asks like, oh, why do you have to be home by 9 o'clock? You don't really have to explain yourself. If you tell your friend, hey, I gotta leave by 9, they're like, no, stay. No is an answer. You do not have to go on this long-winded story as to why you have this boundary and why you're choosing to go home early. You don't have to go on this long rant about why. No is an answer, and that's good enough. And if the person does not take no as an answer, then that is your cue to just let that person go. Because the people who do not respect your boundary are those who benefit from you having none. Number 4, people are able to just sense your feminine energy. When you walk into a room and you have feminine energy, people can just tell that you have feminine energy. It just radiates from you. It radiates through the way that you speak. It radiates from the way that you dress, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you walk. People can just tell. I've never been the type of person who just kisses on the first date. And I've never had a guy try to kiss me on the first date. Why? Because they can tell that I am just not that type of girl. And a lot of times, whenever you just have feminine energy, you don't even have to tell people what your boundaries are. They can just tell based on the way that you carry yourself and the way that you are. Like my fiance did not try anything with me until the 3rd date. He didn't try to kiss me until the 3rd date. Don't mess with this girl. She obviously has some type of class. And therefore, they know just to not act a certain way around you. And it gets to the point where people will just respect you without you having to even say anything or set any boundaries. They just kind of know this is not the type of girl who you can just disrespect or yell at or just think that you can sleep with on the first date. And so that way you don't even have to say anything. You don't have to set boundaries. People just automatically respect you. Number 5, don't be scared. Not in the sense that like, oh, this person's gonna fight me if I try to set a boundary with them because they're gonna get mad. No, scared that if you do set this boundary, that you're fearful that this person is going to leave your life or that the consequences are going to be that you're gonna lose your job. A lot of times whenever I had struggles with setting boundaries, I was often scared that if I do set this boundary or if I tell them like, hey, I don't like it when you make those types of jokes towards me, or I don't like it when you talk to me that way, I was scared that if I did set these boundaries and that person just was not gonna like me. And that really just comes down to having an anxious attachment style. If you have an anxious attachment style, you're often scared that if you do something wrong or that you say something wrong, that that person is going to leave you or that person is not gonna like you anymore. But at the end of the day, if you are trying to keep the peace with everyone else around you, then you're not keeping the peace within yourself. If you are in a situation where someone makes a comment towards you or is rude to you and you don't say anything to them, you don't set a boundary like, hey, I don't like it whenever you talk to me that way. I don't like it when you make those kinds of jokes towards me. And you just sit there and take it, then you're just gonna go home. You're just gonna go home and you're gonna mope about it and you're gonna call up your friends and complain to them and be like, oh, they said this to me, they said that to me. Instead of just confronting that person right then and there. I am the type of person right now, I used to not be this way, but I am the type of person that if someone says something to me and I'm just like, that didn't come across right. That didn't sound right. I'm the type of person that I will let them know like right then and there. Hey, don't do that. So don't be scared to set boundaries because at the end of the day, you never know. If you do set this boundary, that person might respect you even more and they might not take it the way you thought. However, the way you communicate it is so important when it comes to how the other person is going to respond to you. This is why number 5, tone of voice is incredibly important. So if you are operating in your feminine energy, the last thing you want to do is become super aggressive and upset with the other person. So this is why it's important to speak in a gentle yet assertive tone of voice. So don't sit here and be like, yeah, it's okay, yeah, I just don't like it when you do that. You know, don't do that, but also don't be like, hey, don't do that to me. I don't like when you do that. Stop it. No, be assertive, but don't be passive. It's not what you say, it's how you say it and how you communicate your boundaries to the other person. And a lot of times we think in order to be assertive, we have to just get really aggressive, which is not true. There are ways to communicate your boundaries without getting out of character. So for me, whenever I am setting boundaries, and my maid of honor actually taught me this, is to use the sandwich method. It's basically whenever you're talking to someone and you have an issue, the sandwich method is basically you start off with the conversation being very kind and acknowledging what the person is doing well. And then in the middle of the sandwich, like the meat and stuff, you let them know like, okay, I think you can improve in these areas. And then you end the conversation with acknowledging things that they do well. So for example, let's say you have a friend who always shows up late to your events. The way you communicate it is, I really appreciate it how you show up for me during these times. You're an amazing friend. I love having you in my life. I wish that you would just come to my events on time more often, because that makes me feel like I'm a priority in your life, just because I really enjoy our friendship and I think you're overall an amazing person and I just want to spend more time with you. That's how you do the sandwich method. By doing it this way, it stops the other person from getting really defensive towards you. Because oftentimes when you come at them like, you never show up on time, you never do this, you never do that, then they become extremely aggressive and they get really upset and defensive. So that's not something that you want, because that is going to take you out of character, and then you're going to start to become really defensive and aggressive and try to get your point and feelings across. So I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about a situation that we had run into where there was this girl who was just making comments to my friend that was making my friend really uncomfortable. And she was a little bit nervous to set these boundaries with this person because she didn't want to get out of character and just become super aggressive towards that person or just get really mean with them. And I told her, I was like, whenever you are setting boundaries with someone and you're trying to convey a certain message to them and there's something that they did that you did not like, setting boundaries with them is not mean. And you do not have to be scared to hurt this other person's feelings. This is just how you're feeling. It's how you're feeling, so therefore you should communicate that to that person. But you can communicate it to that person in a certain way to where you do not have to get aggressive and out of character. Let's say there's a girl who is just a little bit too close to your man. Is a little bit too close to your man. And they're kind of rubbing his back and stuff and is talking to him like, hey cutie, how are you doing? And you don't like that and you get really uncomfortable and you're just like, I don't like it when she touches him. Let her know. Let them know that you do not like that. But do it in an assertive way, not in a passive way or not in an aggressive way. So you could say something like, hey girl, hands to yourself, letting her know like, hey, don't touch my man. Don't touch him. You could be like, hands to yourself. You don't have to be like, hey, get your hands off my man. Don't touch him. You don't have to be like that. Or you don't have to be passive like, oh, it's okay, it's fine. Just let her know, hands to yourself, girl. And if she gets really aggressive, like, oh, you're so insecure, distance yourself. Do not even get into it with them, because when you're operating in your feminine energy, you do not argue your feelings. You do not argue about what you're feeling. Number 7, get clarity. This is so important. When you are in a situation with someone and they say something to you that just did not land right, or they make a joke and you're just like, I didn't really like that comment that you just made, get clarity. Ask them, hey, what did you mean by that? And if there was ill intention, a lot of times they will start stuttering and be like, I meant it, you know? So, but if they really didn't mean it in a bad way, it gives the other person a chance to kind of explain, like, this is what I meant by that comment. Because if you do not get clarity, and especially if you have an anxious attachment style, if you do not get clarity, your mind is going to be going 100 miles per hour trying to figure out, why did that person say that to me? What did they mean by that? Because you might have perceived what they said the wrong way because you never got clarity in the first place. There are so many things that a person has said to me that I have perceived the wrong way. But then once I ask them, like, what did you mean by that? I kind of figure out like, okay, I got you. I understand what you meant by that. Like, for example, I have a bridesmaid. I have a bridesmaid who is currently pregnant, and our bridesmaid dresses are being custom made in Ghana. So we're trying to figure out like when's the best time for her to get measured for her dress, because she's gonna have the baby before the wedding. And I had made like a little bit of a joke, and I was like, I'm just gonna send you over to Ghana. I'm just gonna send you to Ghana and just make you stay there for the rest of the wedding and make sure that the dress fit. And in her mind, she thought, you mean you're gonna send me over there so I could lose weight? Because typically people in other countries, they tend to be skinnier. And I was like, no, like, I don't want that to happen. Like, you're pregnant, like, you need to eat, you need your nourishment. I meant I want you to go to Ghana so that way they can keep track of your measurements easier that way. So if she never got clarity, she would have just thought like I just wanted her to hurry up and get skinny after she gave birth. So that's why it's important to get clarity and figure out what that person actually meant by that joke or by that comment, because you never know that you might be overreacting from what they said. Number 8, understand that some people are just intimidated by feminine energy, especially women these days. Whenever they get around someone who just exerts feminine energy and they don't, they become extremely insecure, and they start to kind of feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Is this how a lady is supposed to act? Is this how a woman is supposed to act? And they start to become extremely insecure within themselves, and then they start putting that out to you. If there's a woman who is not confident within themselves and they become extremely aggressive, they're operating in their masculine energy, and they get around a woman who is operating in her feminine energy, a lot of women can be very intimidated by that. a woman who is soft-spoken and carries herself a certain way, we often can be seen as someone that you can like walk all over. So just understand that there's been a lot of times where there are just women out here who just don't like me for no reason at all. There's no reason behind it. They just don't like me. The moment they meet me, they automatically are like, I don't like her, because I'm operating in, again, my feminine energy, my nature, my kindness, my want to care for other people. And if you find yourself around a person who is very intimidated by your feminine energy, it's best to just keep them out of your life and surround yourself with other women who are on the same path as you and are going to help you in your feminine journey. And then finally, learn when to walk away. I had a friend who was getting married. This particular friend I had been friends with for a really long time, since we were like 12 years old. And in the beginning of our relationship, it was a very toxic relationship where we would constantly be gossiping and talking bad about other people. And she was definitely operating in her masculine energy. And for me, I was operating in my feminine energy. But the more I was around her, I realized that I started acting more in my masculine energy because her energy was rubbing off on me. But as we got older, I just started to become more mature. I no longer wanted to be a part of just mindless gossip about other people. And there was one time she was getting married and she was talking trash about all of her bridesmaids, specifically one where one of the bridesmaids just so happened to be her brother's wife. And we had gone out to eat, and the entire time she was talking about this girl and talking about her bridesmaids. And I just kind of sat there and I just didn't really say anything. And I noticed that because I wasn't saying anything, she turned her negative energy onto me. And she started being like, Devin, why aren't you saying anything? Like, why aren't you talking to me? Like, you know, what do you think of this situation? And I told her, I was like, listen, I just don't want to talk about gossip anymore. I just don't want to gossip about other people anymore, especially, you know, your bridesmaids. These are the people that are going to be standing up there with you during your wedding. And it was just like, I was just sitting there, just like, I just don't want to be around this. So me and her are no longer friends anymore. But when you are around people who are operating in their masculine energy and you are operating more in your feminine energy, you start to just be like, I just don't want to be around this. I do not want to participate in these types of situations anymore. I do not want to participate in these types of conversations anymore. It does not benefit me. It does not make me feel good. So you really have to just learn how to just distance yourself from other people. Because whether you like it or not, people who you hang around with their energies do rub off on you. So it's important to surround yourself with women who are positive, who are very graceful, who are kind, and who respect your boundaries. So that way you don't have to sit there and have to tell them what your boundaries are. They just automatically know because they are also operating in that energy and they know there's just certain ways that you behave. Sometimes you just have to learn when to walk away from people. Some people just will not respect your boundaries. They will not respect your feelings. They will not validate your feelings for you. You have to validate that within yourself. And you have to be so confident when it comes down to your boundaries and know, this is my boundary and I'm going to stick to it and nobody else can sway it. You have to be really confident in the boundaries that you are setting. That way no one can break your walls down. And if there is a person who is trying to break that wall down and bring you down to their level, then you need to learn to just walk away and remove that person out of your life. Now, don't ghost them and be like, you know, block their number or block them on Instagram, because I don't feel like that's a healthy way to express your boundaries. A lot of times people, they just think like, oh, I'm just gonna block that person out of my life. Like, no, like let them know, like, listen, this is how I've been feeling. I don't like it when you behave like this, and I've tried to convey this message to you multiple times and it doesn't seem like anything is helping. So therefore, I'm just choosing to distance myself from you. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your life, and I wish you well. And then you can block them if you know that they're the type of person that's gonna message you back and just argue with you. So if they're the type of person that's gonna message you back and just argue with you, just block them, because you do not need that in your life. But yes, still convey your boundaries to that person and let them know, I do not like this. And if you have tried to and they still don't respect it, sorry girl, you gotta let them go. Well, thank you so much for coming back to my YouTube video. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and with love.